So today the parasha is called Shoftim, and I've entitled it, Can We Change the World? Now, in 1789 France, the conflict between the French Revolution and the Catholic Church resulted in the separation of church and state, and the supremacy of the state prevailed. In 1863 in the U.S., democracy was described by President Abraham Lincoln as a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Many proclaim that democracy is the best form of government. But is this what God wants for us? Every nation has its own ideas on how to rule its people, but what does the Torah say? In this week's parasha, Shoftim, which is judges, we find 4 roles of leadership: the judge, which is shofet in Hebrew, priest, the kohen, king, melech, and prophet, navi, all of whom would work together to form a just government for the people. It begins in Devarim 16, verses 18 to 20, which states, "You shall appoint shoftim v'shotrim, magistrates and officials for your tribes, and they shall govern the people with due justice. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall show no partiality. You shall not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts the words of the righteous. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice you shall pursue, so that you may thrive and occupy the land that your God has given you." I think that's why among our people we have such a strong sense of justice, and you see so many people fighting for that. How many elected or appointed leaders, however, today truly care about justice or whether their people thrive? In Devarim 17:8 to 11 it says, "If a case is too difficult for you to decide, you shall promptly return to the place that your God will have chosen and appear before the Levitical priests, the Kohanim, or the magistrate in charge at the time, and present your case." Well, here we see the Kohanim, who serve as a link between the Creator and the people would be called to rule justly in difficult cases. So you have the Levitical priests working together with the judges. There's no separation between physical matters and spiritual ones. Last week, Mauricio gave us an excellent message about how these two cannot be separated in our personal lives, and here it's expanded to the life of the community. The judges, together with the Kohanim, would have to be righteous men, tzaddikim, whose hearts were bent upon serving God and the people with justice. That's the ideal. But history reveals that due to the heart of man, without God, it is impossible. However, with God, all things are possible. In verses 14 to 18, we read about the next of the 4 roles, the king. The Creator gave us the freedom to choose a king. But did he want this for his people? No, he didn't, but he allowed it. He set Israel apart from the other nations who had their gods, but he would be their king. Our God would be our king. However, we and they preferred to be like the other nations, and we still do. He wanted his people to follow him and to obey his principles, but again we're dealing with the flawed heart of man. Only God is perfect. The king was warned not to return to Egypt because he desired too many horses, nor to have too many wives, lest his heart go astray, like King Solomon did, nor desire too much wealth, nor be so proud as to lord his position over the people. In this portion, we were told to never return to Egypt. Yet I know many Egyptian Jews who lived and prospered in Egypt until they were expelled when Nasser took over and dethroned King Farouk. Amongst that was my husband's family, my ex-husband's own family. They had been so wealthy. You can't even imagine how wealthy these people were. But this time, most left with nothing. Perhaps if their parents had read and believed God's words, they would have never returned there. But when we don't learn from history, we are bound to repeat it, which is why it is so important for us to do what the Kohen was told to do next: to write a Torah scroll for the king, to study every day. Then he could lead the people in righteousness. With this, herein lies the formula for righteous living, even if it is a struggle. The king would rely, just the way that we began with the judges and the Kohanim will work together. Now we find the king who would rely on the next role in this parasha, the prophet. Devarim 18:15. From among your own people, your God, Yud He Vav He, will raise up for you a prophet like myself. He's talking about Moses. To him you shall hear, you shall listen. And what would we listen to? What would we hear from him? In the next verse 16, Moses is reminding them about their experience at Mount Sinai, alluding to the voice of God speaking the words, the 10 Commandments, that he himself would subsequently inscribe upon 2 tablets of stone. That's all we had at this point. In verse 18 we read, I will raise up for them from among your own people a prophet like yourself, meaning Moses, in whose mouth I will put my words, and who will speak to them all that I command. Now this prophecy is being used in religious circles to point to Jesus as its fulfillment. If that is indeed the case, then he, this prophet, Jesus, would be like Moses. And what does that infer? Moses was a mere mortal man. Not mere, but he was a mortal. But he was beloved by the Creator. He spoke face to face with him. And neither Moses nor Yeshua, as we know him, ever said that they were the Creator. This was all interpretation. But they were God's messengers. Moses, who first handed us the commandments, and Yeshua, who worked to bring us back to them. Always the focus was on God and his commandments, not on the messengers. They never brought attention to themselves, always to the message. And we can kill God's messengers, as we did most of the prophets, but we can't kill God's message. Verse 18 continues, and anyone who fails to heed the words that the prophet speaks in my name, I myself will call to account. This means that the prophet was an ambassador of the Almighty. In my name means he was given the authority to represent God in all he did and spoke. And if we didn't heed the words, not the opinions, of the prophet, we would be held accountable. Verse 22 states, but any prophet who presumes to speak in my name, this is like the 3rd commandment, taking his name in vain, any prophet who presumes to speak in my name, in his authority, any prophecy that I did not command to be uttered, or who speaks, again, in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. We were not to pay attention to the words of the prophets of the other nations, to their soothsayers, to their diviners, their casters of spells, consulters of the dead, ghosts and spirits. We might ask, who does this today? Well, have you heard of seances? Speaking to the dead, necromancy, astrology, consulting the rune stones or the tarot cards, playing with the Ouija board, all those channelers and so many others. I played with all these things. not only played with them, I was deeply involved. And I found that they were correct in some of their messages, but they led me down the wrong path. Only God's prophets, the God of the universe, only His prophets spoke the truth 100% of the time, which is how we can know that they are from Him. We need to be so careful because there is more danger in half-truths than in outright lies. Now that verse ended, that prophet shall die. And I can tell you from first-hand experience that after many years of being immersed in New Age ideologies and teaching others to do so, I almost died. No one else tried to kill me. I almost died. I fell into such a deep state of depression and anxiety that I could no longer see clearly. But I had developed so much pride from all those years of thinking that I was more spiritually advanced than others that I wouldn't seek the help I so desperately needed. It was as if I was walking in a haze each and every day. But when God saw that I had had enough, He woke me up to the reality of His existence through these very verses in Deuteronomy 18. And as I read each one, I saw that all the things that I had been involved in were an abomination to God. And my first thought was, why didn't anyone ever tell me about this? I'm not sure I would have listened. But on that day, the day that I turned my life over to God and to His Torah, my life began to change dramatically in every area for the better, and it continues to do so this day. But because of these things, the world is in dire straits, and the ailments plaguing it in every area of our society are multiplying exponentially. We can see that in every area. People may think that we're more enlightened and we're more advanced, but I can guarantee we are not. The proposed solutions by all these organizations that are promoting their own agendas are simply band-aid solutions, which cannot be effective because we're dealing with the heart and the soul of mankind that is flawed. Education alone cannot work, because if you educate a petty thief, he will become a corporate thief. It's a hard issue. Fighting against racism or anti-Semitism without dealing with the root is futile. And the root is the heart. And only God can change our hearts. To cure the symptoms, the root must be healed. But sadly, most of the world has turned their backs on the Creator, arrogantly thinking that they know better than He does about how we are to live. There's no other answer to the world's problems than the words that God gave us at Sinai. Trusting in any other ideologies or theologies is like worshiping false gods. So what can you and I do about it? Can we change the world? Moses himself didn't change the world, but he brought us the key that could, and that began the process, the Torah. Yeshua didn't change the world, but he brought us back to the key and reminded us that it is universal. Every answer that would solve the dilemmas on this planet lie within it, and it begins with you and me. We cannot change others, but with God's help, we can change ourselves. And that's our challenge as people who are Shomer Torah, keepers of the Torah. Excuse me. Through Moses, God revealed Himself to Pharaoh and all of Egypt, including the Israelites in Goshen. And one day, He will reveal Himself to this entire world. We don't have to be concerned about what that would look like, or to be obsessed about the end times. We leave that up to God. We only have to live now. We don't have to defend our God, as so many religions do. He can defend Himself. If we have to defend Him, He's no longer God. That's what our Rabbi would tell us. We don't even have to defend what we believe. We just have to live it and show it to others and watch the results. We don't have to go out and destroy their idols. Sometimes we feel like tearing down monuments. We don't have to destroy their idols. We just have to not turn ourselves, mundane things, into idols in our own lives. We don't have to tear down their pillars, but we'll watch as God does that for His name's sake. We don't need the God of AI, artificial intelligence. God gave us a brain imprinted with His intelligence. We just have to use it. Each of us has daily challenges to deal with at home, at work, with family, neighbors, and friends. And when we don't know how to handle certain issues, the best thing to do is to ask God for the wisdom and then to muster up the courage to deal with them. The Torah addresses every situation that we will confront in our lives. There are times when we fail, and that's the time to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to reach out to others, to ask for help, to be humble enough to admit that we have failed, to turn back to our God, to ask for His forgiveness, to make restitution. Then our God helps us to begin again. Wisdom, honesty, transparency, respect, reverence, and morality are sorely lacking in today's society. So let us, as His remnant, be the examples of these qualities to those around us. Let us walk in the footsteps of Rabbeinu Moshe and Rabboni Yeshua, holding tight to the motto in this parasha, Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof. Justice, justice, you must pursue. Shabbat Shalom.